All right, well, welcome everybody to the third and final class on Esau and Jacob. And actually, I'm really happy it's only three because after looking into it, I think it fits better as a three series and not a four series. So what we'll do tonight is go through everything from Jacob arriving to see Laban through the death of Isaac. And then at the end, those of us who are here will have a discussion about whether or not we think there was reconciliation or not. And those of you at home can talk amongst yourselves about whether or not you think there was reconciliation or not. And it's a great way to have a group session at home if you want to invite people over. Pause right now, get them to come over, open a bottle of wine. I'm just kidding. All right, so Esau and Jacob, do they reconcile? We pick up. I got to get my pointer up there so I'm on the right screen and so I can scroll through. Here we go. We pick up in Genesis 28. So that begins with Isaac telling Jacob not to take a wife from the Canaanite people, but to go to his home country, to his uncle Laban, to find a wife. Esau hears of what Isaac says to Jacob, and having already have taken several Canaanite women to be his wives, he takes a new wife. He chooses Ishmael's daughter, a name I can't pronounce, Mahalath, hoping that his choice will find favor with his father. So right in the beginning of the end, we see here Isaac continuing to, I peeked out there, Isaac continuing to, I'm going to turn the volume down a little bit on here. There we go. Isaac continuing to be the chosen, the child who is blessed by his father, and receiving and taking his father's advice, and Esau striving for the birthright that he sold for some soup. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. And so one of the interesting things, I want to go back to this slide. Esau thinks, okay, so he wants us to have a wife from our family, so I'll go to Ishmael and get a wife from the Ishmaelites. But he fails to recognize the Ishmaelites are also on the outside here. They're just like the Canaanites. And so remember, this whole thing started with that tribalism. And we continue to see the more we insist everything is our way, the more we create schismatic sects amongst us. So Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran, and he came to a certain place and stayed there that night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and laid down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed. And behold, there was a ladder set upon the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. Now, I tried to put Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin in, but I couldn't figure out how to make it play automatically. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west, to the east, to the north, and to the south. And in you your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. What does it sound like? Abraham. Behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So, this has always been something that we've read along, and we read it just a couple weeks ago, the last Sunday in the Epiphany, alongside, no we didn't. We didn't. But this is something we often read alongside the crucifixion narrative as Jesus being the stairway to heaven. And we read it when Jesus talks to Philip, which we did read a few weeks ago. When he's sitting and he says, "You'll see greater things than these." the angels of heaven descending and ascending upon him. So a little bit of a commentary on the ancient Near East and what Jacob would have been familiar with. The ladder or stairway that Jacob sees in his dream is a passageway between heaven and earth. The comparable word in Akkadian is used in Mesopotamian mythology to describe what the messenger of the gods uses when he wants to pass from one realm to another. It is this mythological stairway that the Babylonians sought to represent in the architecture of the ziggurats. And so you know the ziggurats that look like stairs. That's an attempt to make a stairway to heaven. And these had been built to provide a way for the deity to descend to the temple and the town. Jacob's background would have given him familiarity with this concept, and thus he would conclude that he was in a sacred spot and there was a portal open between the worlds. Though he sees the stairway in his dream and the messengers, angels, are using it to pass between realms. Now this is an important point. Embarking on and returning from missions, not procession or parade. The Lord is not portrayed as having used it. So this is different. He's not taking a Mesopotamian belief and just using it as it is. God's showing him, I think there's a little bit of truth in all religions and there's all truth in Christianity, right? And so the Mesopotamians have a little bit of truth in this vision of this ziggurat, stairway to heaven, that the angels use to ascend and descend, right? So the angels come down for missions on this stairway that he's seeing. This, like he's seeing something we can't see with our senses, right? But the Lord is not portraying as having used it. So in the mythological sense, the gods use it to come down. But what Jacob's seeing is the angels only, God standing above it, not coming down, but is standing beside it. This is the proper translation of the Hebrew idiom. So what does this mean for Jacob? Jacob receives a reiteration of the Abraham covenant, which remembered, but also receives an additional promise. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. This is especially important given what is about to happen to Jacob as he ventures to find a wife. God is preparing him for difficulty. Trust me. That's what God's saying here. Trust me. Like all Old Testament prophecy, this has a meaning in the time. This vision is to have Jacob trust him then, but it also has a meaning that pertains to Jesus. And here's some of the ancient fathers. The ladder of Jacob's dream symbolizes the cross of Christ. It also means that Jacob foresaw Christ on earth. Ambrose says that. But in another interpretation, Christ is the one who's at the top of the ladder, the Word of God. The angels ascending and descending represent good preachers, says Augustine. I think Augustine's a little bit off there. In yet another interpretation, the ladder is understood to be the church, says St. Bede. The promise of the Lord standing above the ladder manifests the extraordinary care and love of God by Chrysostom. I like that one a lot. I think this does preconfigure Christ coming down from heaven and taking on the flesh. But as we see, God will not come down until he takes on the flesh. Until then, he's sending angels down on missions. Jacob continues his journey to find a wife from his kinsmen. While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her, so we skip ahead here to where he meets Rachel. Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Now as soon as Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob came near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. They're really making sure you know that this is his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud, and Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's kinsman, that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, I love the emphasis there, his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him into his house. Jacob told Laban all these things, and Laban said to him, "Surely you are my bone and my flesh," which is a hearkening back to creation. Adam says that about Eve, "Bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. Surely you are my bone and my flesh." Then Laban said to Jacob, "Because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be?" Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak. I don't know what that means. But Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, "I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel." Laban said, "It is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to any other man. Stay with me." So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, so he served 7 years to marry her. Then Jacob said to Laban, after 7 years, "Give me my wife, that I may go into her, for my time is completed." So Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. But in the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Laban gave his female servant Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be her servant. And in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And Jacob said to Laban, "What have you done to me? Did I not serve with you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me?" Now, if we think back in this story, who was the one who came up with all the deceiving plans and helped Jacob? It was his mother. So she comes from a family of wheelers and dealers. Let's put it that way. She comes from a family of wheelers and dealers. And Laban is no different than his sister. And Jacob, has got his compens, for sure, for stealing his brother's birthright. But nonetheless, the birthright remains his. And so I want us to think about that. I've talked about this often when I talk about forgiveness, especially within the sacrament of confession or forgiving another person. There is forgiveness that is eternal, not of this world, and there are consequences for actions. We should never confuse those two things. You can do something terrible. Murder a family member of mine. And I can forgive you for that. My forgiveness does not mean that you don't serve a life sentence in jail. Forgiveness, consequences. Okay? Covenant, consequences. Jacob never, even though Jacob's kind of despicable at times, he never loses the covenant. God never says, I am sick of how deceitful you are. Give it back to Esau, because I'm God and I can do that. He honors the covenant. But when you are treacherous, you will be dealt with treacherously at some point in your life. And that is the consequences of actions. God will not protect us from consequences, but he will give us eternal life and forgive us. This is a really good picture of that. 7 years to marry the woman he wants, and he's married the wrong one. What happens next? Laban said, "It's not so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also return for serving another 7 years." Jacob did so and completed her week. Then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban gave his female servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel to be her servant. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and served Laban for another 7 years. 2 wives. No, thank you. One's enough. Now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's he has gained all his wealth. And Jacob saw that Laban did not regard him with favor as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and your kindred, and I will be with you. So Jacob has the dream. God says, trust me. Jacob trusts. He's there for about 20 years. And now the contract's up. He knows he can leave. And I can relate to this. Kind of like when you're ready to move out of your house to move into a newer house. You start noticing the things in your house that you don't like, that you never noticed before. And so Jacob's like, I don't have to be here anymore. It's time to go. And everyone starts noticing. People start not liking him. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah into the field where his flock was and said to them, I see that your father does not regard me with favor as he did before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength, that your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. But God did not permit him to harm me. Thus God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. In the breeding season of the flock I lifted up my eyes, and I saw in a dream that the goats that mated with the flock were striped, spotted, and mottled. Then the angel of God said to me in a dream, Jacob, and I said, here I am. And he said, lift up your eyes and see all the goats that mate with the flock are striped, spotted, and mottled. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now arise, go out from this land, and return to the land of your kindred. Again, remember, consequences. Then Rachel and Leah answered, said to him, is there any portion or inheritance left to us in our father's house? Are we not regarded by him as foreigners? For he has sold us, and he has indeed devoured our money. All the wealth that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do. So he has convinced 2 wives to agree with him, which is a miracle. As Jacob flees, he does not know Rachel has stolen Laban's god idols. Laban pursues Jacob and catches him. They argue. Laban attempts to find the idols, but cannot. Jacob says this, I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God saw my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. Then Laban answered and said to Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks, and all that you see is mine. But what can I do this day for these my daughters, or for the children whom they have borne? Come now, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. Then Laban said to Jacob, see this heap and pillar which I have set between me and you? This heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness. That I will not pass over this heap to you, and you will not pass over this heap and this pillar to me and do harm. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac, and Jacob offered a sacrifice in the hill country and called his kinsmen to eat bread. They ate bread and spent the night in the hill country. This is an interesting foreshadowing of what happens later. And it's a question I'm not going to answer right now, but I want you to think about. Is this reconciliation or an armistice? Jacob had been gone from his country for 20 years. He'd been manipulated by Laban. Upon returning home, Jacob sends word to his brother Esau. I'm coming home. Esau then goes out to meet Jacob with 400 men, which intimidates Jacob. Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and your kindred, that I may do you good. I am not worthy of the least of all these deeds of steadfast love and of all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For with only my staff I have crossed the Jordan and now have become two camps. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he might come and attack me, the mothers with the children. But you said, I will surely do good and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for the multitude. So he stayed there that night, and from what he had with him, he took a present for his brother Esau. Now we think a present, we're thinking like, a new TV. He brings him 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 milking camels and their calves, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. These he handed over to his servants, every drove by himself, and said to his servants, pass on ahead of me and put a space between drove and drove. He instructed the first, when Esau, my brother, meets you and asks you, to whom do you belong? Where are you going? And whose are these ahead of you? Then you shall say, they belong to your servant Jacob. They are a present sent to my lord Esau. And moreover, he is behind us. He likewise instructed the second and the third, and all who follow the droves. You shall say the same thing to Esau when you find him. And you shall say, moreover, your servant Jacob is behind us. For he thought, I may appease him with the present that goes ahead of me, and afterward I shall see his face. Perhaps he shall accept me, will accept me. So the present passed on ahead of him, and he himself stayed that night in the camp. The same night he arose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had, and Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he had not prevailed against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, let me go, for the day is broken. Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. And he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. Then he said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask my name? And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel. Peniel means the face of God, saying, for I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the people of Israel do not eat sinew, the thigh that is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of the thigh. So there he is wrestling with, Jacob wrestles with God. And this has always been, and is renamed Israel. This has always been something, or does he wrestle with the angel of the Lord? Is it a pre-configured Jesus? What is exactly happening here? I don't have really a great answer to it. I like the angel of the Lord. I don't think in the Christian tradition you have a corporal, embodied God wrestling with someone. If God could be a body, then why does he need to take on the flesh of the virgin to become man? So I like to think it's the angel of the Lord that Jacob wrestles with. I'm no Old Testament expert, so there might be someone out there that says I'm completely wrong, and they might be completely right, but I like the picture of him wrestling with the angel of the Lord, maybe St. Michael or Gabriel even. But he wrestles with this angel, and in a lot of ways, we can look at this in a figurative sense of Jacob wrestling with trusting God. He's trusted God in everything he's done. But Esau, he really fears. Far more than he feared Laban or his father. Remember, Jacob was the cook and Esau was the hunter. So I think there's a lot of him wrestling here with God, and should I really trust God or not? And Jacob lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the 2 female servants, and he put the servants with their children in front, then Leah with her children, Rachel and Joseph last of all. He himself went on before, bowing himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. So remember, he's separated his entire tribe up. So Jacob's still smart. He's done, I think, 2 things. He's presenting an offering to his brother that he can afford to give up. Perhaps his brother doesn't have. Perhaps it's a huge windfall for Esau, and they can live peacefully. But if Esau's remember, Esau's not bright, but strong. If Esau's putting all his eggs in his basket with that 400 bunch of troops, and Jacob has a tribe with him, it's not just him and his kids. There's a big group of people, of herdsmen. He's surrounded Esau. Esau's eggs are all in one basket. He spread his camp out. So if one part of his camp falls, the rest can come in. So Jacob's, let's end this peacefully, but if not, I think I'm ready. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And when Esau lifted up his eyes and saw the women and children, he said, "Who are these with you?" Jacob said, "The children from whom God has graciously given your servant." And the servants drew near, and they and their children, and bowed down. Leah likewise and her children drew near and bowed down. And at last Joseph and Rachel drew near, and they bowed down. Esau said, "What do you mean by all this company that I meet?" So remember, as he's approaching, he's meeting all these folks. Jacob answered, "To find favor in the sight of my Lord." But Esau said, "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself." Jacob said, "No, please, if I have found favor in your sight, then accept my present from my hand. For I have seen your face, which is like seeing the face of God. And you have accepted me. Please accept my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough." Thus he urged him, and he took it. Then Esau said, "Let us journey on our way, and I will go ahead of you." But Jacob said to him, "My Lord knows that the children are frail, and nursing flocks and herds are a care to me. If they are driven hard for one day, all the flocks will die. Let my Lord pass on ahead of his servant, and I will lead on slowly at the pace of the livestock, or ahead of me and at the place of the children, until I come to see my Lord at Seir." So Esau said, "Let me leave with you some of the people who are with me." But he said, "What need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord." So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. But Jacob journeyed to Succoth, and built himself a house and made booths for his livestock. Therefore, the name of the place is called Succoth. So there's what appears to be reconciliation between the two of them. There's gifts exchanged and rejected. But they both choose to live in different places. After this, Rachel has a son and dies during childbirth. Then, this happens. And Jacob came to his father Isaac at Mamre, or whatever that is, Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had sojourned. Now the days of Isaac were 180 years, and Isaac breathed his last, and he died and was gathered to his people, old and full of days, and his sons Esau and Jacob together buried him. So the question is, was there true reconciliation? And with that, I will leave all of our folks at home to struggle with that question, because I'm not going to give a clear and sufficient answer, because I think it's a question that we all need to think about. So I hope you all have a wonderful evening. God bless. Whoops, there we go.